Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. For those of you that like to get to the juicy story where you have the straightforward Bigfoot encounter, well, I've got that for you on this channel right now. But the full stories are really worth listening to, and I've got them listed at the bottom, because really, just the Bigfoot encounter without the whole experience from the beginning to the middle and the end is really worth listening to. But if you just want to get to the juicy encounter that people have sent in to me, by all means, here are a few examples of them right now on my channel. So get straight into the business, shall we? And let's get started.
Then I saw them, and nothing in this world prepared me for what I was witnessing. These creatures should not have existed in our reality, because they easily belonged to the days when dinosaurs roamed the earth. They were engaged in an immense brawl, and quite literally fighting to the death. Of that I was certain. The energy they exhibited between each other was one of intense hatred and abhorrent hostility. These hideously vile-looking creatures were colossal, easily 10 feet tall, 1,200 pounds, and 6 foot wide. But the most disturbing thing was that they were distinctly human-like. It was like they were half human and half lizard, or even Komodo dragon, if you like. Without a shadow of a doubt, they were grotesquely evil and emitted a very sulphurous odour that smelled like death and decay. They were covered from head to toe with very rough-looking scaly skin, and they stood up on long bow legs that were thick, powerful, and dense with muscle, and they had very strong, thick, powerful tails. I noticed that there were 3 creatures, 2 that were fighting and tearing each other apart, while one was sitting back watching the show quite happily, seemingly unfazed by the whole affair, without an ounce of compassion or concern on its face. It really didn't care what the outcome of this fight would be. It was of no concern to this creature. I concluded in that brief second that it was 2 males fighting over a female, and whoever victoriously won the deadly assault would become the female suitor. Well, that was my distinct impression. I'm not saying I'm right, but that's what I thought. These creatures were the ugliest, most grotesque things I've ever seen in my entire life, and all of them had unique, individual, different markings on their skins. One was dotted in yellows and browns and reds, while the largest one had distinct black and green markings, while the female was much plainer and was virtually a mottled brown, ugly colour. The skins were like the patterns you will see on snakes. The heads on these creatures were utterly humongous, but flat with a long rounded snout, with the hugest mouth which opened up to reveal very sharp, deadly, treacherous-looking, jagged incisors. They also possessed human-like hands and feet, with jagged, sharp claws for nails that would easily lacerate your flesh in seconds. The wanton eyes on these creatures were deep brown and appeared insidiously evil and demoniacal. I watched these pernicious creatures tearing, slashing and ripping each other apart and lashing into each other's flesh with their sharp talons, all the while hissing, snarling and growling. The slightly larger of the 2 reptilian-like humanoids had the upper hand, as he was infinitely larger and more powerful, using his physical advantages, however slight, to his optimum leverage. I watched him pounding the other humanoid and holding him down with a hefty brute force, where he proceeded to bite out chunks of the creature's flesh, devouring them up in huge, gluttonous mouthfuls, all the while resuming his unceasing attack. His hideous foe was quite literally being eaten alive, while he weakly fought back with all his might that was left within him, until finally, in an exhausted act of surrender, he succumbed to his fatal wounds, and finally died. Then the most extraordinary thing happened. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. The victor directed the female humanoid lizard to the dead corpse, and then she began to devour it hungrily as meaty crumbs of the creature messily splattered over the grass. The male waited patiently until she had eaten her fill, and then proceeded to finish off all the remains until everything had been devoured. I'd never in my life seen such a savage depravity before. But what were these creatures, I wondered? Were they left-over dinosaurs from a bygone time? I could not be certain about that. The large, repugnant male proceeded to sniff the air, and I noticed his forked tongue seemed to be sensing something in the environment, as if he was detecting an interesting, curious smell that he could not fathom and was not well acquainted with. But whatever the smell was, it was of great interest and curiosity to him. I wondered what it was that he was smelling, and then suddenly, to my horrified realization, it suddenly dawned on me that he'd obviously got a whiff of me, and it was me that he was smelling. I had no idea what to do because I was so incapacitated by the petrifying, alarming realization that this thing could come after me, literally kill me, devour me, but worst of all, eat me alive. That was my biggest fear. I was left with two choices. One was to get back on my bike and ride back to the farm as fast as I possibly could, or the other was just to stay very still and hope the creature just lost interest in me and went away. I decided to remain very still and hope that the creature would lose interest in my smell. But lose interest in me he most certainly did not. And to my horror, this foul, malevolent creature began to forage around in the bushes and undergrowth, looking for the source of the smell. Before I knew it, he was there, eyeing me down with the most wicked, treacherous, diabolical brown eyes that I have ever seen. For a second he was very still, and just stood there glaring at me through his predatory eyes that were devoid of any humanity whatsoever. It truly felt like this creature wanted my very soul. I let out a shrill scream as the creature pounced upon me and bit into my arm, and the pain was excruciating and shooting through my body like violent fireworks, erupting in agonizing explosive spasms. I fainted in shock and terror, becoming momentarily unconscious, which may well have been my saving grace. The male humanoid carried my seemingly motionless body over to the female. I think he thought I was dead. He placed me on the ground before her and presented me as another trophy for the female to banquet and feast upon. Possibly he thought he would score more points with her as a potential suitor, and as he placed me down before her, I sensed his ego was very inflated by pride, and it was as if he was saying, "Look what I got for you, another tasty meal. Am I not worthy of your attentions?" I'm glad to say that it would seem that the female's appetite had all but receded, and she had very little interest in eating me at all. I think she was simply not hungry, and she eyed me with a very little interest, as if her powerful suitor had presented her with an offensive, pathetic offering. She let out a disgusting, disapproving grunt to express her complete displeasure, and proceeded to totter away on her long, thick bow legs. The male looked glum and very disappointed by her disinterest in his prized trophy. All this time I played dead, because I figured if they thought I was dead, they would falsely believe that they could dine on me later, and when they were distracted, that would be my opportunity to slip away. Well, that was the plan that was unravelling in my head anyway. The large male suddenly threw me over his massive shoulders like a sack of potatoes, carrying me into an underground cave system that I didn't even know existed in this part of Maholisburg. I was being carried through a jumbo-sized maze of underground tunnels that twisted, spiralled and curled like a large freeway system of some kind. The inner structures of these seemingly endless long underground tunnels were solid, strong and tall, made up of bright red dirt and heavy boulders caked together to create powerful foundations. To my horror, there were dozens of these hideous creatures bustling around, and the place was a hive of activity, giving me the impression of a very busy city. There were quite literally colonies of these strange humanoids, and they appeared organised, intelligent, and seemed to have a very distinguished, orderly and structured hierarchy system among them. Well, that's what the fleeting impression was that I got of this underground labyrinth, but it reeked to high heaven, smelling exactly like rotten flesh. The big creature threw me down in front of this large brown reptilian humanoid that towered above him. I think it may have been his mother or some kind of other female of prominence in their society, maybe even a queen of some kind, who knows? I noticed all the females appeared to be a very dull, ugly brown colour, while the males were speckled like colourful snakes with varying mottled patterns and colours on their reptilian scaly skins. The female was hideously ugly but titanic in size and girth and about 13 feet tall. but when she saw me lying before her as a rather scrawny offering, she bristled and erupted in an indignant furor. I could tell that she was incandescent with rage. She made a furious cacophony of noises, and finally she grunted in displeasure, clearly appalled and offended by the very sight of me, and her nostrils flared in disgust as she smelt me. When she looked at the reptilian that had presented me before her as some kind of a gift, she oscillated her claw-like hands towards him indignantly to express her complete revulsion. Even I was shocked to find that these creatures found me to be repulsive and piteous. Suddenly a speckled yellow and white reptilian creature came scuttling forward, and listening to the grunting female's moans, he obediently upon her orders slung me over his shoulders and took me away from her fast. Finally I found myself being carried out of the cool darkness of the cave into the bright, startling light of the sun, which was so dramatic in its contrast that my eyes began to water. Before I knew it, the creature tossed me on the ground like I was a heap of revolting, disgusting rubbish that he wanted to discard. I luckily fell onto a large, soft, grassy verge, where my fall was softened by the cushioning of the thick undergrowth. For a while I stood there, unable to believe what had transpired, and it amazed me to see that I was still actually alive. But the wound on my arm was a painful reminder that I needed immediate medical attention. It was still bleeding profusely, but I could tell a deep-seated infection was coursing its way through my tissues very fast indeed, and my life literally hung in the balance.
So there we are. That's the juicy bits of our stories tonight. I personally think you should go back and listen to the whole story because it makes it so much more exciting, because then you learn all about where it happened, the location, and all about the fabulous characters involved in the story. And that makes the story so much more gripping. But as I say so, go down to the description and then click on to the YouTube link, and then you will hear the whole story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.